Melania Trump's dark past is coming to light. Journalist Michael Wolff has decided to sue her, publicly exposing her connections to Jeffrey Epstein. For years, she tried to keep this buried through billion-dollar threats. Now she's desperately fleeing from being questioned under oath about what really happened in that social circle. But before we continue, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel and leave your like on the video to help our channel continue growing. In October 2025, journalist Michael Wolff made a strategic decision that caught many by surprise. He sued Melania Trump before she could sue him. The move came after the First Lady's lawyers sent a letter threatening a billion-dollar lawsuit if Wolff did not retract public statements about her connections to Jeffrey Epstein. Wolff's response was unusual but calculated. Instead of backing down or waiting to be sued, he filed an anti-SLAPP action in New York, a type of lawsuit designed specifically to protect journalists from intimidating lawsuits aimed at silencing criticism. This legal maneuver not only changed the game, but gave Wolff something the Trump team clearly prefers to avoid: subpoena power. What makes this case particularly relevant are not just the specific allegations, but what they represent about access to information and public accountability. Wolff conducted extensive interviews with Epstein before the financier's death in 2019. He made public statements about Melania's role in Epstein's social circle in the 1990s and 2000s, and publicly questioned her involvement in managing the White House's response to controversies involving Epstein's files. There are documented and undisputed photographs showing Melania Trump alongside Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein, and Prince Andrew at social events at Mar-a-Lago in 2000. These are verifiable historical facts. The central question is not whether these associations existed. They did exist. The question is whether a journalist has the right to ask questions about these connections and their significance without facing billion-dollar lawsuit threats. Melania and her lawyer's argument is that these questions constitute defamation. But there is a fundamental difference between defamation and legitimate investigative journalism. Questioning the role of a public figure in events involving one of the most notorious criminal scandals in recent American history is not defamation. It is exactly the type of scrutiny that public figures, especially those who occupy positions of power and influence, should expect in a functional democracy. The court petition filed by Melania Trump's team reveals a legal strategy that raises serious questions about accountability and transparency. Instead of addressing the substantive issues raised by Wolff, the defense focused almost entirely on procedural technicalities. The petition's central argument is that Wolff failed to serve her properly in the lawsuit. Melania's lawyers claim she is domiciled in Florida, not New York, and that neither her lawyers nor Trump Tower staff were authorized to receive service on her behalf. When Wolff tried to deliver the documents to her lawyer's office, he was refused. When he tried at Trump Tower, staff initially accepted, but then backed down when they realized it was for the First Lady. This situation creates a troubling legal paradox. Melania Trump maintains an apartment at Trump Tower in New York. She spent years living in that building. Her own lawyers directed communications to that address. Yet when confronted with a lawsuit, her team argues that she is, for all legal purposes, unreachable at that location. The argument that New York courts lack jurisdiction over her is particularly problematic. Melania Trump lived in New York for decades. She did business in New York. Her husband built his real estate empire in New York. Trump Tower is not just an address, it was the Trump family's primary residence for years. Arguing that New York lacks jurisdiction over someone with such deep connections to the state not only defies common sense, but sets a dangerous precedent. What makes this strategy even more revealing is the contrast with earlier threats. Melania threatened Wolff with a billion-dollar lawsuit. Her public statements and legal letters were filled with aggressive language about defamation and reputational damage. But when finally confronted with an actual lawsuit, a lawsuit she doesn't control, and that would require her to prove her allegations under oath, The response is to retreat to technical arguments about service and jurisdiction. This is not the posture of someone confident in the strength of their claims. It is the posture of someone trying to avoid legal discovery and testimony under oath. While this legal dispute unfolds, another aspect of the situation deserves attention: the $75 million documentary about Melania Trump that is failing spectacularly at the box office. Amazon MGM Studios paid $40 million for the documentary's distribution rights and spent another $35 million on marketing, an unprecedented investment for a political documentary. The film was released in approximately 2,000 theaters in the United States and 5,000 worldwide, a distribution scale typically reserved for superhero films, not documentaries. Initial industry projections estimated an opening between $1 and $5 million. Disastrous numbers for a $75 million investment. Reports from theaters in London showed that only one ticket had been sold for a Friday screening in a main auditorium. This is not just a box office disappointment. It is a monumental failure that raises questions about resource allocation and priorities at a time when many Americans are struggling economically. The timing couldn't be worse. While the documentary promotes the First Lady's glamorous life and her preparations for the inauguration, millions of Americans face inflation, rising housing costs, and economic uncertainty. The disconnect is glaring and symbolically devastating. More concerning is Brett Ratner's involvement as director. Ratner faced multiple allegations of sexual misconduct during the Me Too era and has been away from Hollywood since 2017. His selection for this project, supposedly the first and only director considered, raises questions about judgment and values. What message does it send when the First Lady of the United States chooses to work with someone whose professional record has been marked by such controversies? The combination of these elements, the legal evasion through procedural technicalities, the expensive and unsuccessful documentary, the choice of a controversial director, and the general disconnect with the hardships faced by ordinary Americans, paints a troubling picture of distorted priorities and lack of accountability. The Wolf versus Trump case is not just about a journalist and a first lady. It is about whether public figures can use the legal system to intimidate and silence legitimate questions. It is about whether transparency and accountability still mean anything in our democracy. And it is about whether those in positions of power and privilege can be held accountable by the same rules that apply to everyone else. This case will continue to develop in the coming months, and its implications go far beyond Melania Trump and Michael Wolff. If you believe in the importance of press freedom and holding public figures accountable, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. In the comments, I'd like to know your opinion. Do you think journalists should have the right to question public figures' connections to individuals like Jeffrey Epstein, or do these questions cross the line into defamation? Your engagement is essential for us to continue bringing serious and independent analysis.